Today we're looking at a Landrover Discovery TD5, which has got the typical failed airbag problem, so it won't pass an MOT. Many people like to replace the airbags with springs, but it destroys the quality of the car. The wafty ride goes. So we have a pair of these. These are genuine Dunlop Air Ride springs. They are cheaper than buying the coil springs, and they are easy to fit. And today I'm going to show you how. First things first, safety. Cars on a flat level surface, both front wheels are chocked. That is because the handbrake works on the transmission, and there's always a little bit of play in the transmission. You don't want that. It just keeps the car solid, stops it landing on you. Not very nice. Second, we have a robust pair of axle stands. These will support 5 tons. They aren't going anywhere. They will stop the car landing on you. Always a good insurance policy. If you haven't got them, a pair of those, 45 quid. That's as cheap as it gets. Second, robust trolley jack. They don't cost hundreds of pounds. That one is currently on eBay for 150 quid. It's a Sealy 3-ton trolley jack. Very, very simple. So to start the job off, I've loosened the wheel nuts on the car. Then I use the trolley jack on the toe bracket, Dixon bait toe bracket there, to jack the car up as high as it will go. Then put the axle stands underneath the chassis brackets, as you can see under there. That isn't going to go anywhere, and with the wheel chocks underneath the front, it's not going to cause a danger to anybody. So to save time, I've already removed the first wheel. Once the car's jacked up, on the chassis, the wheel will still be in contact with the floor. So then, you need to put the jack underneath the axle beam, ideally with a bit of cloth or rag underneath it to stop scratching any underseal off the axle, and lift it so that the wheel comes off the floor. You can get your fingers underneath it. And take off the wheel nuts and remove the wheel. This will expose the air spring. As you can see, this one has failed. It's baggy. It's porous from air, and what actually happens, these only last about 5 years. They're a serviceable part, they're not a permanent part. So what actually happens is over time, road salt and grit gets between the frame, the plastic moulding frame of the air spring and the rubber bellows, and it causes the rubber to degrade. So that's what's happened. It's gone porous here, and we're now going to replace that with a new airbag. As you can see, rain has stopped play briefly, but I just wanted to go over why airbags are so off-putting to some people. The big mistake that people make is when they try and take off the airbag, they cut through the pipe. The pipe supplies the air pressure to the airbag, which forms the height of the suspension and makes it self-leveling. Once you cut through the pipe, especially with a saw or with wire cutters, you'll damage the pipe, you'll squash the pipe, and it will never fit properly, and it will always cause leaks. So, the question is, understand what you're dealing with. This is the top of your airbag. It's held in by 2 clips, one of which is corroded away, which used to go there, and one of which you can just see is here. It's just a spring clip. When you order the airbags, buy the spring clips as well. They're about 10p each. Now, if you look on top of the airbag, I've scraped away all the dust and debris. It's normally full of rubbish, but you can see a pipe here, and that's going into the airbag union there. Now that is a push-fit bayonet connector, in that the pipe goes into a smooth set of jaws with O-rings in there, and pulling the pipe out causes the O-rings to grip on the pipe and causes the air seal. So to remove it, you need a pair of long nose pliers to push that part of the bayonet in and then pull the pipe out cleanly. It's a bit tough, you need to give it a good old tug, but it's not impossible, and I'll show you next. So, this is the air spring, the failed air spring now removed. That is the pipe union. As you can see, that's the push fit in there. And the outer collar, which I'm just wiggling now with my fingers, that is normally out like that with a pipe in. To remove the pipe, you need a pair of long nose pliers. That. You need to grip the loose ring here you need to push it back into the spring. That will allow you to simultaneously pull the pipe out. Generally the pipes have been in there for 5 years or more, so they don't like coming out very easily. So you've got to force that in there and give the pipe a good tug. Don't be tempted to cut the pipe off. If you cut the pipe off, you can only cut the pipe twice in the life of the car, or replace the pipe. So if you can avoid cutting the pipe, please do. So, the spring is held in by the bayonet fitting at the bottom. So all you do, when the spring is disconnected, loose and deflated, you take off the clips from the top, which I'll show you on the other spring. You rotate it either way by 90 degrees and it lifts out. So there's the bayonet, the male bayonet side of the fitting. And on the axle, there is the bayonet receiver, which I've cleaned up with a nylon brush. And this one has no corrosion. That's in really good condition. What you may see when you take yours off is quite a lot of surface corrosion there. If the strength has gone from that bracket, you need to get another bracket welded on before you fit a new spring. But generally it's just surface rust. As you can see, there's the end of the pipe pulled out. This one has been cut before, as you can see from the end of the pipe. You can see a blade mark there. That's not going to harm the pipe. What will harm the pipe is if there are any scratch lines running down the length of it, because that means that the air has a way to escape. If there's little rings around the pipe, don't worry about it. The O-rings will grip that quite happily. So I'm not going to cut that pipe. I'm going to fit the pipe into the new air spring in a moment, and I'm going to test it with some soapy water to make sure it's sealed up properly after I've inflated the suspension. Anyway, while we're here, we can do a check on the brakes. This brake disc is quite new. It's got a little bit of surface corrosion on there from rainwater and salt, but that's nothing to worry about. Brake pads are in good condition. The wheel nuts, wheel studs are in good condition. The bearing's been replaced. We know that it's a good bearing. The back plate is in good condition. There's very mild surface rust on there, but that's normal. There's your flexi brake hose. That's in good condition. It's got all the retaining parts still on there. This is the wire for the ABS. Now that should be attached to these yellow plastic clips, and it isn't. They do come loose, so what we're going to do, just to keep it tidy, is run that in there and rotate that round to where it should be, and it won't pop out again. See, the wire has to run down there, go underneath the pipe and into the ABS sensor at the back there, which you can see just where my hands are. So that's all back now. Bit of debris from where the air spring was removed, but apart from that it's all good. As you can see, the chassis on this one is in good condition. The wiring's all in good condition. There's a little bit of surface rust here, but it's surface that is solid. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to, you can tap it with a screwdriver and make sure it's all solid. What I am going to do, before I refit the air spring, I'm just going to brush some underseal on here to make sure it's all protected from the salt for the next winter, and then recommend to the owner that they have the whole car steam cleaned and undersealed at the earliest opportunity. For those of you not in the know, the Discovery 2 is a fantastic machine. It doesn't seem to suffer body rot as much as the first series Discovery. However, the chassis can corrode spectacularly, and it's around here where it goes, around the fuel tank and around the chassis here on this hoop. And it normally goes on the inside, which is why you need to underseal it regularly. Every couple of years should be fine. Get it done properly, so they steam clean it and inject all the hollow sections of the chassis with Waxall or similar product, and obviously mask up the exhaust, because otherwise it will stink. So this is our old tired airbag. As you can see, it's an original Dunlop part. There's two types fitted at the factory. There's the ContiTech and the Dunlop. The Dunlops were used later because there was a recall on the ContiTech ones. They split prematurely because of a manufacturing fault. So you may see Dunlops on there, you may see ContiTech. If you see anything else, you should change them out beforehand, because they're probably Chinese copies. So, as if by magic, it's a brand new identical part. Now, the observant among you will see that the little brass studs are not centre at 6 o'clock and 12 o'clock. They're slightly offset. These are the same part for the left hand side and the right hand side of the car, but they're handed like this. So for the left hand side the pipe faces forwards, for the right hand side the pipe faces backwards, but the same part will do either side. You should always replace the springs as a pair. That's coil springs or air springs. Always replace an axle set together. Never replace one spring. Even if it's failed prematurely, you replace the pair. Always. And anyone who doesn't do that, you're taking your life in your own hands. So that's the original spring. As you can see, it's quite robust. The brass studs are corroded a little bit. There's no cracking to the top despite the weight of the car. These are the same parts that they use on trucks. They're designed to carry a lot of weight for a lot of miles. The only thing is, the rubber is rubber and it will perish with salt and road grime. That's fit for the bin. You can't recycle these ones. You can't refurbish these ones. It's not worth doing anyway. So, how much are they? Some people say £140. I got a pair of these delivered for £140 from a reputable Range Rover parts supplier. There's quite a few out there. Go for the genuine parts. You've got the Dunlop part number on the top, serial number and manufacturing date down there, and the air spring actually has the Dunlop logo and new ride on the top. Contitech ones are just as good. They fit just as well. They have the same fittings. They look slightly different. They're pretty good. I prefer the Dunlops. They just seem to have a bit more robust rubber on them. So now we're going to fit this. To fit them, we insert this bayonet piece into the socket on the axle, noting that this will be pointing towards us. Then we're going to rotate it clockwise a quarter turn and it will all fit together nicely. Okay, so as you can see, there's the axle and chassis with the space for the air spring. If I just offer that up there, that's how it's going to fit. That space is a little bit tight, so we're going to make this a little bit easier. If you remember at the start of the video, to get the air spring out, to compress it, we had to use the trolley jack underneath the axle beam to close the gap between the axle and the chassis to compress the air out of the air spring. What we're going to do now is just let the axle down slightly to open up this space, which makes it much easier to get this in. Once it's fitted onto the bayonet fitting, we're going to use the jack to just increase the height of the axle against the chassis, and it just closes these into their mating faces so we can put the clips on and reconnect the air. It just makes life easier. There's no point making it any more difficult than it has to be. Okay, we're just lowering the jack very gently now. So there's the axle low on this side. So all we need to do, just that extra 2 or 3 inches makes all the difference. Ready? Go. So, I haven't got any under seal on me, which is a bit awkward, but it happens. Some people have, some people haven't. It's not in the car today, and as you can see, I'm working on somebody's drive. I always have this stuff. This is called copper grease, sometimes called copper ease or copper slip. What it is a multi-purpose grease which has got copper ground into it. So, on YouTube you'll see, this isn't a toothbrush, that's copper grease. Looks a bit like toothpaste, but it's browny red, copper coloured basically. And what we're going to do is just put some of that around here, and it's just to protect that area from any corrosion, because that's where the frame of the air spring sits. And what's left on the toothbrush is going to get brushed into the corrosion. Now bear in mind, I'm not going to go to town on this because the owner is going to have it all steam cleaned and waxed in a few weeks time. But that's just brush some copper grease into the surface corrosion there. It's going to rest that for a few days just to make sure it doesn't take hold, and that's all going to be sorted out. So now we're going to fit the air spring. One new air spring. So as a reminder, the pipe on this one face forward. This is the near side or the left hand drive for our American friends. So we want to rotate it like that, so that bayonet fits into the socket on the chassis. And it's as simple as this. We've opened up the gap nicely by lowering the trolley jack. The pipe union points towards you. Place it into the socket, turn it anti-clockwise, and there we go, it's fitted. That's in. It's supposed to be a little bit loose, don't worry about it. And now we can just use the jack to adjust the right height so these studs fit through the stud holes here and here. Very simple. Yeah, you can record it right here.
So Andy's adjusting the jack now. Say hi, Andy.
Closes that a little bit more.
Oh, it's caught over there, Andy, so I can free it.
Very cool. Just squeeze past. So there we go. That just needs to go into that fitting there.
Shall I do that part, Andy? This bit?
That's all good.
Oh.
Take it gently. Nearly there. One. This one button through, and there's the other one. There's the other one. You see him coming through? So you're going to put a little bit more pressure on the jack to get those brass studs through, and we'll clip them in. So that air spring is in there. It's a slightly loose fit, and that's ready to be clipped into place. Okay, so with the air springs I bought, the supplier kindly gave us a set of these. Now that's good sense, because whenever you replace the air springs, you should really replace the clips. You need 2 per air spring. We ordered 2 air springs, they gave us 4 clips. Very kind of them. Beats having to order separate parts, I think. This was BSB Auto Parts. There are several other suppliers around, but they had a good deal and they had stock for the right parts, and they're very good service, so thank you BSB Auto Parts. What we're going to do now, put 2 clips aside for the right hand side of the car. We're just going to fit these 2 clips onto the brass studs now. Really very simple. You see a groove in the brass stud. Try not to drop it on the floor like I just did. And you literally push the stud in like that. Then you'll need a pair of pliers to be able to finish pushing it home. But always start it with your fingers, because if you start it with your pliers, you'll probably bend it. So those two are on there. I'm just going to go and get my pliers and push those home. So literally just take the end of your pliers and push that on like so. It's a bit fiddly. There. That's on tight and turned round. The other one on tight, turned round. That's now fitted.
Back, yeah?
Doesn't matter as long as it's turned around.
Okay.
So whenever you come and take those off again, probably in the next 5 years, you'll probably find they've rusted. But they will keep it in place until you take them off.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the air pipe, and it needs to go into that air pipe socket there. Now, what's important with the air ride systems is you mustn't get grease or oil in them. Sometimes people use some silicone lubricant, which is fine. I don't think you really need to. The pipe's clean, it's fresh. It literally just needs to push into that socket and make sure it's pushed fully home, like that. And that is in there tight. That's done. People think the air suspension is complex. It's not. It's really quite simple. It's an air compressor, it's an air tank, some air tubes, 2 airbags at the back to give you self-leveling suspension, and on each wheel there is a height sensor, which is this piece here, and that sends messages back to a computer which knows how high the car is and when to put more air or less air into each airbag through the valve block. It's very, very simple. One thing to understand though is when the ignition is off on the car, the computer will still be live and it may still try and self-level the suspension. Now, if you're working on the airbags, that's probably not a good idea. One thing it does do though, if you've got any door open, it stops the computer self-leveling the suspension for safety. You don't want to be doing that when people are getting in and out of the car. So if for some reason you don't want to disconnect the battery, for example, you don't know the radio code because the customers have given it to you, then just leave a door open. A fraction like that is fine. And then the suspension won't try and inflate or deflate while you're working on it. So we're just removing the wheel now. We've got the car jacked up on the axle stands as we showed you before. I've got the trolley jack underneath the beam axle, and I've jacked the axle this side that I'm working on so I can get my hand underneath the tyre. It doesn't need to be very high at all, we just need to get the tyre off. So I'm just going to use my handy gun. Not an expensive piece of kit, you don't need the best tools in the world to do this. It's a Makita impact driver, they're about 120 quid. You can do it with a socket wrench if you haven't got one of these, or a drill, but this works quite well. As you can see, it saves a lot of time, especially when the locking wheel nut key is trying to fit into a rusty locking nut. And that's your wheel off. So this is the offside, the driver's side in the UK, and this airbag is actually okay, but it looks to be a Chinese copy. This means that somebody has fitted a single airbag to the axle. The other side was an original Dunlop. This is some unknown make. And as you can see, there's plenty of dust and debris around here, which all needs to come off first. And it's not fitting particularly well into the axle. It is holding air though. Now, there are many schools of thought on how to deflate this. We do need to change it. We must replace the airbags as an axle set. So there are plenty of tools out there. There's nanocom tools. There's all sorts of very good and very expensive factory spec computer systems. But the easiest way to deflate this is stick a hole in the back. And I'm going to show you how to do this right now.
Yeah, sure. Now.
Okay, this has been replaced in the past, and you can see it's not particularly well fitted. It's not seated very well down here. So also, if you use the original clips, I just pulled that off with my fingers, that shouldn't happen. So what we're going to do, this bag I understand is 5 years old, so it might still work. I wouldn't want to reuse it, so we're just going to pierce a hole in it and let it deflate, which will take about 5 minutes. Time to have a cup of tea or a tin of drink.
Shall we see you pierce it, Andy?
So take a piercing tool, put it in the side of the airbag, and it will go. And that is now leaking air. So we're just scraping off the loose dirt and rust off here. You can see this is typical of a Landrover chassis. It's actually quite a good one. That is all solid, just surface rust, but it does need protecting. So as I said to the owner earlier, when it goes in and gets its MOT, the next stop, inside the next month, we'll be taking it to a specialist who does cavity wax protection on vehicles, those Land Rovers, and get the whole chassis and underside protected. And it'll be good for another few years. If all this isn't taken care of, within a year, 18 months, there'll be holes, and the only permanent solution is to replace the back half of the chassis, which is an expensive job. Personally, I'd replace the whole chassis and keep the car forever, but not everybody's got that kind of money. So what we've done here, we've cleaned up the female bayonet of the spring seat, we've cleaned up the spring plate and the spring hanger here of any dirt and debris. The clips were fitted so badly before, they actually came off in my fingers. So they're in bits in the drive somewhere. The previous guy, whoever fitted this single air spring, reused the old clips, which is a big no-no, because they will actually keep the spring in place. So we're just going to fit the new air spring now and put the clips in place and plug him back in. And just on the driveway, there's the remnants of what's left of the spring retaining clip. That's actually one of the originals by the looks of it. It's not very pleasant, is it? So that's not going to do its job anymore. We're going to fit a new spring and 2 new clips. So again, I'm going to stick a bit of the copper paste around the spring seat to keep any corrosion at bay. And I'm going to just wax some over this to keep any corrosion at bay for the next few weeks, until the owner can get the whole chassis steam cleaned and protected. So this stuff isn't expensive, just do the job rather well. Right, that's done. So here we have 2 new spring clips, 1 new air spring, identical to the one that we fitted to the other side. And it's just going to go in on the axle, be jacked up into place into the spring seat, and we're going to connect it with spring clips, plug in the air, and that's the job done. And then we've just got to put the wheel back on and re-inflate the suspension. 1 air spring, brand new Landrover part, genuine Dunlop to fit. There's your bayonet, there's your pipe coming from the back of the car. So with a hose outlet facing towards you, fit the bayonet into the seat like that, turn clockwise, quarter turn, and then just jack the car up. And these little brass buttons need to go through the holes up here and here can see just there, I'll poke my prod through there, so you can just see my finger poking through. That's where the hole is there, that's where the hole is here. And then once we've secured it, these two clips, plug in the air line and off we go. So now we just, springs in place, the brass buttons are pushing through the spring seat. We're just going to push the clips on my hand so they're in place, and use a spanner or something blunt to just push the clips home. There we go. That's done. That one there. Let's use the spanner. And that is this one's a bit tight. There we go. And they're on there to stay. Excellent. Now I've just got to plug in the airline. Right, so now the wheels are back on. Everything's been checked over, tightened, and we've got the car now raised up so the wheels are just touching the floor. We've got good access to the airbags, which are currently deflated. We're jacking it from the tow bracket. You can use any reasonable jacking point with a trolley jack. We're not going underneath the car again, so this is perfectly safe. What we're going to do now is start up the car and allow some air to get into the airbags so they resume their normal shape. So at the moment, if you look in there, it looks like the wrinkled sleeve of a shirt. What we want to do is for that airbag to balloon up to achieve its normal shape but at low pressure, and then we're going to turn off the ignition, lower the car down to just below its normal ride height, and start it up again and let the car pump up the suspension and make sure it all works. So the airbag's pumped up, it's all up to temperature, the engine's been running for about 2-3 minutes, and it's at normal ride height. Didn't need any adjustments or calibration at all. Now we're just going to do a test to raise it to off-road height and make sure it's pumping up properly, and then resume normal ride height, then we're done. So I'm just going to press the off-road mode, pressing the button and hold it until it chimes. Raise the bottom car to off-road height. It takes about a minute. As you can see, that's the airbag's changing. That click was the airbag just finding its own seat, which is what you need to do. That's now at off-road height, looking absolutely perfect. Let's go around and check the other side. Other side, airbag's pumped up perfectly, no air leaks, everything's working fine. Everyone's happy, job done.